He ended up in Detroit because they heard that he was hiring at Ford, and they were making good money in those days.
Ever since Henry Ford announced the $5 day to the world came to Detroit. Isidoro Valley immigrated to America in search of a better life for his 5 children.
We were happy. We were amazed at the way people live in this country, you know. All the modern things that we didn't have in Italy in those days.
By 1920, 1,000 blacks a day arrived by train to Detroit. Willie Nelson, a World War I veteran, made the trip from South Carolina.
Ford's was very liberal, I think, in the hiring practice, and especially blacks, if I'm to understand or listen to some of the things my father had said, you know, that people, blacks coming up from the South, looking for great opportunities for living, seeked out the Ford Motor Company.
Divided by race, religion, and language, workers joined together at the gates of the massive Rouge plant seeking a job.
I came from Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and for 5 months, along with thousands of other workers, lined up in front of the Ford employment office to go to work with Mr. Ford.
A Scottish electrician found work inside the Rouge plant. His son would try to follow.
I tried to get a job at Rouge, and what they did is they used to line up like 2 o'clock in the morning, even in the wintertime, when the word went out that they were hiring, or perhaps there's a notice in the paper, and thousands of workers used to line up. But people were pretty desperate for jobs.
Desperate enough to buy a job if you had to.
People that knew people in the Rouge were selling jobs. You go down there and pay him, I don't know, different prices, $25, $50. He would give you a letter, and the Rouge would honor it.
By the late 20s, the Rouge plant employed nearly 100,000 workers, the largest industrial complex in the world. There was no part of a car it could not produce.
You know, it would rank among the 7 wonders of the world, I suppose, in terms of industrial history, because it was a facility that could take raw materials right off the boat and from the train load and produce a finished car at the other end of the process. And there's nothing really that's ever matched it in terms of its capacity to integrate virtually every step in the process of making a complex metal machine.
The Rouge was a symbol of the power and the promise of industrial America. But that promise was about to be broken. In August of 1931, the Ford Rouge plant stopped making cars.
Hunger and desperation was the order of the day.
Detroit's a cold, cold place, and I ain't got a dime to my name.
Unemployment was rampant. People were being evicted. The city was broke.
I begged the city council in Dearborn. I said, feed me and I'll pay you back whatever it costs. Give me the bill. I'll pay you back, but feed our family. I said, if I don't get anything to eat by tonight, I said, you know that store on Michigan Avenue? It was named Dasco store. I said, I'm going to break that store in, break the windows, and go and get food to feed my family. So you have a choice. Get food for me, or you'll have to throw me in jail.
During the Depression in 1931, we were deported. But my parents were deported, and 5 of us children who were born here didn't have to go, but my parents didn't want to split up the family, so all of us went.
Desperate for jobs and hope, over 3,000 demonstrators gathered at the Fort Street Bridge on a cold March morning in 1932. Handmade signs carried their message.
It was more or less that they were going for jobs. That's what most people were doing, you know. They were hungry. They need work.
The marchers headed down Miller Road to the employment office at Gate 3. Waiting for them, the Dearborn Police, and the head of the Ford Service Department, Harry Bennett. They were met with tear gas, fire hoses, nightsticks, and bullets.
There were people bleeding, there was smoke in the air, people had frozen water on their clothes from the fire hoses.
All hell broke loose, and it was a massacre of innocent people who had no intention whatsoever of causing any violence.
The aftermath of the bloodshed, 5 dead, over 20 people injured.
What did I think of it? I thought they were, well, they weren't human. They couldn't be human to shoot them, men, women, and children down like flies.
Well, that's when I grew up. When I saw what happened that day, it made me turn against the system. And it was my decision right there on Miller Road that I was going to do something about it.
Five days after the shootings, a funeral procession headed down Woodward Avenue. An estimated 60,000 people joined in to express their sympathy and outrage.
Local 600 was born in blood. That day on Miller Road, when blood was shed by both black and white, it carried over to the organizing drive at Ford.
1 year after the Hunger March massacre, Diego Rivera finished the murals depicting working conditions inside the Rouge plant. Soon, Espadito Valley would learn firsthand what those working conditions were like.
I wanted a job at Ford where my dad worked, you know. So I got the job. What happened after that is I found out how tough it was to work at Ford in those days.
You couldn't talk, you couldn't turn your head, you couldn't go for a drink of water without permission. And the assembly line, that it began to feel like a chain gang line.
To work at the Ford Motor Company, you lost your manhood and dignity at that time. I have never lived under what you call physical slavery, like I heard about my ancestors had to live under in the South. But I had, from 1935 up until 1941, I caught hell, not only me, people caught hell in Ford Motor Company as to the conditions.
The service department was Ford's private armed police force inside and outside the plant. Recruited from prisons and local gangs, their main mission was to ferret out Union supporters.
You might see a guy in there, you might say, oh, that guy looks like he might be a serviceman. And you see him 2 or 3 days, you don't see if somebody else is in there. You never know who you were talking to. If they found out that you belonged to the Union, that was the end of it. They would fire you.
Kuzman Dorash, a Ukrainian foundry worker, held union meetings in his basement. His 14-year-old son Walter watched for trouble.
I acted as a lookout at the meeting because at that time the Ford Service Department used to cruise the streets, and where they'd see a lot of cars parked, they'd take down a lot of plate license numbers, and then they'd check these people out, and eventually they were discharged.
2 company men, I don't know if they're servicemen, who they were dressed up. I'd go to church, they'd follow me. I go shopping, they followed me. No matter where I went, they're behind me. I said to myself, boy, oh boy, the company had used every tactics they could so we couldn't get a union. And I said to myself, we're going to get one come hell or high water.
We shall not be moved.
In 1937, successful sit-down strikes at General Motors and Chrysler would establish the UAW as the workers' sole bargaining agent. The victories were celebrated by a massive rally held in Cadillac Square, the largest in the city's history. Encouraged by their success, union organizers turned their attention to Ford. On May 26, Walter Reuther, Richard Frankenstein, Richard Meriwether, and Ralph Dunham climbed the stairs leading to the overpass at Gate 4, intent on passing out Union literature. They were met by renowned gangster Angelo Caruso and a group of Ford thugs.
The Battle of the Overpass was a key turning point in many respects, probably most important in terms of its public relations impact. The Battle of the Overpass was such a public event that so clearly demonstrated that Henry Ford was no longer the kindly gentleman engineer that he had been presented to the public as for so many years, but that instead he was tolerating a degree of illegal violence that the public wasn't previously aware of. And the Battle of the Overpass clearly demonstrated that something had gone quite wrong at the Ford Motor Company.
The public was repulsed at the brutality of the attack and the viciousness, and it was unprovoked.
Labor organizers are the worst thing that ever struck the earth, said Henry Ford. We'll never recognize the UAW or any other union. In order to stop the steady march of workers' solidarity, Ford attempted to create racial division. He tried to enlist the support of foundry workers like Willie Nelson.
He himself was recruited back then, I guess maybe 37, 38, to be one of the servicemen. And I'm sure everyone know about what the servicemen was, and our union term, we used to call them goons, I guess they used to call them. But anyway, he turned that down because he didn't want a part of it.
At that time, you had 17,000 blacks working in the foundry alone. And they were apprehensive about joining the union. And rightly so, because the unions had never accepted black workers as a whole along the line. They accepted the whites.
But a group of progressive black organizers believed in and fought for the union. Men like Horace Sheffield, Chris Alston, Shelton Taps, and Coleman Young.
One thing that attracted me about the union was that they taught unity between black and white. So there was no hatred involved. It was brotherhood. And they made a cogent argument, which I use today, is that white workers cannot be free as long as black workers are in chains, or vice versa.
On April 1st, 1941, 1,500 men sat down and immobilized the rolling mill. Early the next day, 50,000 Rouge workers walked off their jobs singing Solidarity Forever. The strike was on.
We were in a celebrating mood. The union is here to help us, now maybe we can work like human beings instead of slaves.
Harry Bennett used every tactic he could to break the strike. Black workers were recruited as scabs. Violence erupted on the picket lines, but the UAW did not back down. On April 11th, a reluctant, defeated Henry Ford agreed to a National Labor Relations Board election. 1 month later, Ray Comrie and his father, along with thousands of other River Rouge workers, voted for UAW CIO representation.
He said, son, you better become unionized, because I'll tell you why. When the company gets through with you, they'll just give you a kick in the pants and off you go. Because your union is there to help you. The companies, they'll help you, but they'll destroy you with that help.
With the union came dignity and bargaining rights. Life slowly changed for the better inside the Rouge, and swiftly changed for the worst for America.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Ray Comrie would soon join General Patton on the battlefield. Elizabeth Jackson and thousands of other women would join the production line at the Rouge.
It was very strange to be a female involved in something. I've always heard of factories, but never expected to see how it really looked. I never dreamed that I would even work in a factory.
In 1942, Liz Jackson went to work in the aluminum foundry, helping to build parts for B-24 bombers. Soon after, with the encouragement of friend Buddy Battle, she started attending union meetings.
once you attend these meetings and see the need of the problems that they were having, it was necessary that women participate. We got good cooperation from the guys at Local 600. They encouraged us to run for union office, where in some locals they did not want women to run for office, but we were encouraged to run for office and participate in the union at Local 600.
And here comes the Local 600 band, one of the best bands in the labor movement, led by two very pretty drum majorettes. Let's listen to the band for a moment.
At its peak, membership at Local 600 swelled to 100,000. The workers now had a collective voice that could not be silenced. With each new contract, progress was made. At Labor Day parades, Rouge workers flaunted their pride, their politics, and their independence.
It has been a liberal, progressive local union, and I might say that during the organizing drives, there was a number of socialists, communists, all kind of radicals that were involved in the organizing of the union.
Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
In 1952, the House Un-American Activities Committee named over 200 suspected communists in the Detroit area. Local 600 was one of its prime targets.
You had some of our own officers in our international union sided with the forces of McCarthy to bring Local 600 down to its knees.
Local 600 delegates went to the convention and they had them sitting in red chairs.
Communists in their drive for world domination have perfected the techniques of exploiting injustice and forging poverty into power.
Walter Reuther eventually took control of Local 600, and dissidents like Dave Moore and Bernie Bellison were thrown out of office.
It was like a bullet through me because we didn't have a trial, we didn't have anything. He just came in and removed us from office and called us communists, and that was the end of it.
I suppose if you look back, and I think Walter would say the same thing were he here, maybe that wasn't one of our wisest decisions.
For many members of Local 600, the early 50s will be remembered as a time of political fear. Espadito Valley will remember it as a time of loss. His father, Isidoro, a Gandy dancer by trade, died after hitting his head on a railroad track in the Rouge Yards.
We weren't ready to give up our dad, you know. But because of what we went through, and we were just starting to see daylight, you know, we were starting into things we want, living better and all that, you know. And it took us a while to get used to living without him.
In 1955, a soft-spoken seamstress by the name of Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus. It was the spark that ignited the civil rights movement, and Local 600 members were prepared to carry the torch.
The first time Mrs. Parks ever came to Detroit, it was Local 600 who brought her here. The first time Mrs. Parks ever spoke in a labor local, it was at Local 600.
I would say the union as a whole has done more for to fight discrimination. I would say that even the churches.
The hand of union support has reached to West Virginia coal miners and California farm workers.
Walter Reuther called me up and he said that we need one person who will take charge of organizing, helping to organize Cesar Chavez's campaign for the farm workers.
I'm proud of my local because that's one of the reasons why I started helping the United Farm Workers, who were headed by Cesar Chavez.
More recently, Local 600 has supported democracy in Haiti and marched for the hungry and homeless in Detroit. It is a commitment to fighting injustice, whether in the plant, the community, or the world.
The man who is speaking is a member of the UAW.
United in the struggle, Nelson Mandela visited the Rouge plant in 1990.
I can't think of any other plant he would stop at before he would Rouge, Local 600. And I'm pretty sure that Mandela even heard of us before he ever even came to this country of Local 600.
The history of Local 600 is a history of struggle. The fight that began over 50 years ago continues to this day.
We have a rich history at Local 600, but we're making history again here today. With the modernization of our truck plant and the Ford facilities on site and the investment from Severstal North America, we're creating good middle-class jobs that will go on to the next generation of workers. In 1997, the Rouge was on the comeback trail. UAW Local 600 membership and the Ford Motor Company approved the Rouge Viability Agreement, an aggressive deal to modernize the company's oldest complex. Now called the Ford Rouge Center, the 600-acre site remains Ford Motor Company's largest single industrial facility. It's hardly recognizable anymore with the new plant and all the upgrades in the surrounding plants. It's nothing like it was 20 years ago. It's a completely new complex, and we're very proud of it. There was a time when many people thought Rouge Steel was dead, but in 2004 the historic plant was acquired by Severstal North America. Since that time, the Russian-based company has invested more than $1 billion in equipment and improvements to the operations, making it one of the world's most efficient and advanced steel producers. Nearly 1,500 UAW Local 600 members work at Severstal. We are once again excited about the future of steelmaking here in North America. Outside of the Rouge, we represent over 30 different bargaining units ranging from healthcare workers, health insurance companies, to nursing homes, to vision clinics, to even a group of lawyers that work for Wayne County. So we have people in 4 geographic regions, and we're quite spread out now and very diversified, not only in the men and women we represent, but in the work they do.
It's a new generation coming up, and everybody's looking forward for that. You know, I'm being fortunate to be one of those, and I believe in it. I live it, and I've been enjoying every bit of it. So I think it's going to be a good future.
The history, being part of this local is almost being like part of a fraternity of brethren that goes back to the early 1900s. It's fought hard for a lot of the benefits that we have now, and has affected the way that we live.
I'm very proud to be a Local 600 member. This is probably the most historic union in the country, from what they started with to what it is today and what it could be in the future. This is a heck of a union, and everybody's great. They'll help you out no matter if you're been here 10 years or 10 days. They're always willing, you know, the local's always willing to help you. So I feel very fortunate to be part of this.
I'm confident that Ford and UAW are committed to doing whatever needs to be done so that we'll be successful.
Stay involved, because being involved is the only way you could educate yourself, and you could actually see what the union does for the people when you stay active and you stay involved in everything that's going on. And I've learned that with the years. It's been I've just been involved trying to help any kind of way I can, and I've realized this works. This union works.
We have a saying here at Local 600, a history to be proud of, a tradition to carry on. I hope you remember and honor the history of all the Local 600 members who came before us. I also hope we carry on traditions of this union into the future, a commitment to organize, a commitment to social justice, a commitment to excellence.